Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is you are watching this on here. We have, this summer we've had a lot of crazy people walk in and out of this place, from tourists to black parents to everybody. And then today we have Senator George Maziarz walked in and wanted to see what's going on at the Hub. So we welcome you, George, to the Hub.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Great, great, and it's kind of timely because things are midsummer. Things are coming up to election time. There's some new districting. Now, one thing, if we could just ask you real quick, what is the districting and how does that affect your...
Well, the new 62nd district will cover the city of Niagara, all of Niagara County, including the city of Niagara Falls, all the way into Orleans County, and then 2 towns in Monroe County. The big change is that Niagara Falls will be included, and the city of Rochester and 4 towns in Monroe County will no longer be in the 62nd district. I think it's a positive move. For the last 10 years, Niagara Falls has been part of a Senate district with Buffalo, and the state senator who represented Niagara Falls has always come from the city of Buffalo. I look forward to it. I think it's going to be a challenge, and hopefully, if the voters choose, I'll be representing Niagara Falls come
Great.
January 1, and I look forward to it.
Well, you're certainly no stranger to Niagara Falls, even though you didn't represent. You certainly were involved in many things. Tell us some of the...
You know, it's pretty difficult to represent all of Niagara County and not the city of Niagara Falls and not be involved in some Niagara Falls issues, because I think Niagara Falls is really a hub for all of Western New York, really, because of the tourist attraction, obviously the falls itself, just millions of outsiders who come here to see the falls, hopefully stay a while to see places like Old Fort Niagara and the Wine Trail and Mike Murphy's canal cruise locks, and all those issues. So it's tough not to be involved.
Sure,
to see
sure.
Niagara Falls.
In your tenure in Western New York, what are some of the things that you, let's say, are most proud to have hung your hat on?
I think, there's a lot of things, but I think, back in 1999, I made a very concerted effort at the time with John Prozelak, who ironically is still around, still in business today.
Still cooking steaks,
still cooking steaks, yes he is. But John and I got involved in the effort to revitalize the Niagara Falls International Airport. And, despite a lot of opposition, despite a lot of people who said it couldn't be done, there's a new terminal out at the Niagara Falls International Airport. And, I like to point to a statistic that in 2009, there were about 1,000 enplanements. That's the term that the FAA uses. That's 1,000 passengers, basically, at the old Niagara Falls International Airport terminal. In 2011, just 2 years later, there was over 200,000 enplanements, 200,000 passengers. It was one of the fastest growing airports. The FAA put millions of dollars into renovation of the runway because of that dramatic increase in numbers there. One thing that probably hasn't gotten a whole lot of publicity is that every route that Direct Air flew, another airline, Allegiant, has come in and picked up every one. So the number of passengers is actually, the first quarter of this year was actually up 15%.
Wow. So
we're headed toward another great year. The second thing, is holding the New York State Power Authority accountable and really, I hate to use the word forcing them, maybe cajoling them, convincing them that leaving more of the power here. In the last couple legislative sessions, we've passed a couple of bills that I think are going to economically change the face of Western New York, Niagara County, and Niagara Falls. One is called the Recharge New York program, which provides power over a long-term basis, up to a 7-year basis, for small and medium-sized companies right here in Western New York and in Niagara County. Governor Cuomo, I think in his only visit to Niagara County so far during his tenure, came to North Tonawanda, came to Niagara County to sign that piece of legislation. And he said that because of all the hard work that I did on it. The second one, Craig, and this is something you may be interested in and other people may be interested in. When we have a lot of economic development projects on the books, a lot of things, a lot of good ideas, great ideas that people have for turning the economy around in Niagara Falls, in Niagara County. And the problem has always been there's no money. We passed legislation called the Western New York Power Proceeds Act, which from now on, power that is sold, excess power, that is power that's allocated but unused from the Niagara Power Project produced right here that is sold on the open market. That money has to go into an economic development account to be used here within a 30-mile radius of the plant for economic development, job creation projects. This is going to give people with good ideas, businesses that want to expand here, businesses that want to make a capital investment here, they will be able to access this fund. And it's going to be controlled by people from Western New York, from Niagara County, you know, not some bureaucrats in Albany or New York City. In the 18 months since we've passed this legislation, the Power Authority has been putting this money into an escrow account. In 18 months, a year and a half, there's $15 million in this account already. So you can imagine how this account is going to grow over the years and how much money that these individuals who make these decisions, who will be making these decisions, will have. Those are just a couple of things. You know, when I look at companies that I help to stay here or establish here, companies like you know, CalSpan that have you know, expanded in Niagara Falls, at the Niagara Falls International Airport. You know, some old-time, I guess, old-time companies like Delphi. You know, I'm very proud of the fact, and I say it all the time. Years ago, when Delphi went through its bankruptcy, they closed, what was it, I think, 21 of the 29 plants that they operated. They kept one open. One of the 8 that they kept open was located here in Lockport. Today, there's over 1,000 people still working there. And, you know, I think I had a lot to do with that. I'm very proud of that.
That's great. George, you know, you mentioned about things getting taken care of locally. Your typical day when you go out to Albany, you all get in the same sandbox and you guys start, you know, you promised your constituents this, this, and this. There's a guy from Malone, New York, and there's a guy from Poughkeepsie, and there's you. How do you get what we want put through to the rest of the group?
Well, you know, you have to work. First of all, just the structure of New York State government. The governor is a very powerful force. Any governor is. You know, one of the problems I think with the New York State government, and we clearly had a great number of issues during the 4 years when there was, you know, to be kind, a little bit of I don't know, tumultuous executive branch. You know, with Elliot Spitzer coming in, Governor Spitzer came in with a huge plurality of votes and a program for reform, and he didn't stick around very long. And then Governor Patterson, David Patterson, who was a good friend of mine, I sat next to David for 12 years in the New York State Senate, and David is the nicest person in the world, probably the most person who was ill-equipped to be the governor of the state of New York, though. And, you know, so those 4 years were tumultuous years in Albany. One of my goals, should I be reelected, is to get the governor more engaged in what's going on in Niagara Falls and to get him engaged in programs that are going to work for the city of Niagara Falls. We've seen a lot of things that haven't worked for Niagara Falls, and we're going to change that. Great.
How's your role with the state parks? How are we doing? We've got, of course, the Joseph Davis Park that's going to be managed by the town of Lewiston. We have of course, our Niagara Falls State Park. What's happening with that?
Again, the bottom line, and let's say the Joe Davis thing. Let's talk about that first, Craig. Is that the money that the town of Lewiston is doing to take over that park is coming from the New York Power Authority. Again, that is proceeds that were earned here by selling power that was generated at the Niagara plant that are staying here to rehab this park. I'm embarrassed at the job New York State Parks did at Joe Davis for the last 25 years. You know, when the state parks announced they were closing, quote unquote, Joe Davis State Park, I remember Don Glynn, a longtime reporter from the Niagara Gazette, called me up and said, you know, the state parks announced that they're closing Joe Davis. I said, Don, the reality is the state parks closed Joe Davis 10 years ago. They just didn't make the announcement. You know, the state didn't take care of it at all. It barely cut the grass and picked up the garbage. I think this is a very positive move that Steve Ryder and the town board and town of Lewiston are doing. They're using Greenway money that's generated, again, from the New York State Power Authority to rehabilitate Joe Davis State Park, to make it more of a community park, and I think it's a positive thing. Overall, state parks, particularly the Niagara Falls Park, you know, in 2007, I passed legislation in the New York State Senate that would have kept a percentage of the revenue that's generated in Niagara Falls in Niagara Falls. It would go into a fund called the Niagara Parks Redevelopment Fund, and it wasn't a very large percentage, like 10% of it would have been the Cave of the Winds, the parking, the Viewmobile and the Master Pass. The Assembly at the time was very much opposed to it. The Commissioner of Parks at the time was very much opposed to it. They didn't want to see any park having an advantage over any other park, even though Niagara Falls has for years been the largest revenue producer. It's always Niagara Falls and Jones Beach in Nassau County on Long Island.
Right.
Those are the big revenue producers for state parks. They do have an argument by saying that, look, if we were to reserve money for Niagara Falls State Park, then Jones Beach is going to want to reserve money for, parks on Long Island, and Adirondac's going to want to do something for that. I think that's somewhat of a credible argument, with the exception of Niagara Falls is in such dire economic straits. Jones Beach is a park that's primarily used by locals, by people from usually Queens or Nassau County, whereas Niagara Falls is a park that is utilized by people from all over the world. I'd like to say that New York City is the front door of New York State. I actually think it's more probably Niagara Falls than it is New York City. And if your front yard doesn't look nice, people get an awful bad impression of you real quick. So that legislation didn't go anywhere. In the next legislative session, I'd like to kind of revise that. Again, I want to work with the parks. I think Commissioner Howard is a very nice person. I think she has the best interest of Niagara Falls at heart. Governor Cuomo has allocated $25 million in very tough economic times for rehabilitation work at Niagara Falls State Park. That work is long overdue. I wish we'd passed the bill in 2007. All those projects that we're doing now, we could have done in 2007, and it would have been cheaper.
Moving forward, what do you see? Of course, we've got an election coming up.
Got an election coming up. I'm excited about it. I love being out on the stump, and this is all that I do. I'm not an attorney. I don't have many of my colleagues in the Senate. There's 62 of us. They have a business on the side. I have no idea how they have the time to do it. But I like what I do. The voters, I've been very fortunate. The voters have reelected me every 2 years, and I stay in touch with them. I tell people, I get up in the morning, I can hardly wait to go to work, and I do it 7 days a week. Niagara Falls is going to be challenging, but when I represented the city of Rochester, that was challenging too. And Niagara County is my home. I've lived here my entire life, and I look forward to it. I can work with anybody. I stress that wherever I go. I've had some very public disagreements with some local officials in the city of Niagara Falls. But when you look at my record, I ask people, take a look at my whole record. I'm working very closely with a Democratic governor, and I'm not a Democrat, in case your listeners didn't realize that. But when the Democrats took control of the Senate in 2000 I think it was, let's see, it would have been 2009, 2010. They asked 2 Republican state senators to stay on as committee chairs, only 2. It had never been done in the history of Albany before. I was one of the 2 that they asked to stay on as chairman of the Senate Energy Committee. I think they did it because they knew that I was fair, and it was energy policy. It really doesn't have a lot of partisanship. But I can tell you, partisanship aside, there's I think a lot of bad decisions made locally here in the city of Niagara Falls. USA Niagara is a state agency. When you look at all the economic development tools that the city has, I read in the newspaper, the city has 7 individuals that are full-time in their economic development department. 7 full-time people whose job it is to do economic development. USA Niagara has at least 7 people whose job it is to do economic development in just the downtown corridor of the city of Niagara Falls. Then you have the County of Niagara, which probably has a dozen people whose job it is to do economic development in all of Niagara County. We have more people doing economic development in Niagara County and Niagara Falls. The only thing that we seem to lack is economic development. What I want to do, I think one of my goals is I want to tell the voters out there, look, I want you to hold me accountable. I can list my accomplishments. My opponents are going to go out there, and of course I think they're going to try to spin my record in a negative fashion. And that's what elections are all about. And the voters will make the decision, and I will live with that decision. But hopefully, if I'm still in office after January 1, we're gonna hold people accountable. When you think about it, USA Niagara's mission was to redevelop a very exact, large footprint, small, maybe let's say a medium-sized footprint of the city of Niagara Falls. Well, they've been at it now for over 10 years. They have spent millions of dollars. Have they been successful? If they haven't been successful, and I think what the unfortunate part, Craig, is that people take this the wrong way. They take it as like personal criticism. If they haven't been successful, let's try another model. Let's do something. Let's try different people.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. There is a new initiative with the Community Development Department, which is Seth Piccirillo now, who has some neat housing initiatives that are going. I know on August 14th we're having a community meeting next door at 640 Park Place to discuss the housing initiative that he's suggesting, the grants that are available. And that's exciting. It's something new. It's something that we can try. I just I'm glad you're here and you've had that experience and you've seen what's happened, you've seen what hasn't happened, and hopefully your experience can carry it through.
Do you know when I go? I've been doing a lot of door-to-door work in the city of Niagara Falls. It is. I'll tell you, my batteries get recharged when I go out there and talk to voters, and you can almost predict what people are going to say to you when they come up to you. If they're older, they're going to say to you, Niagara Falls once was a beautiful place. You could go outside. The neighborhoods were good, and they talk about Fall Street, and they mention it's a haven for entertainment and all that stuff. And younger people tend to they talk about the lack of jobs and the lack of opportunities here. You have to sit back and think to yourself, how did it get this way? How did it get this way? Despite the fact that the state and the city and the county have invested hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions. The crime that you have in the city. We are going to convene, if I'm fortunate enough again to be elected, we're going to get, my partners in state government, I'm going to get the governor involved and I think John Chella is an excellent superintendent of police, but we are going to figure out what the crime problem is in the city of Niagara. How can the city of Niagara Falls be the 51st most dangerous city in the United States of America? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me.
No, well, I walked around at about 10 o'clock at night with Dave Giusiana and Sean Weber the other night to scout out the lighting situation on 3rd Street. And I've got to say, actually, the lighting has improved. I think the city has worked well in getting things a little brighter. And I guess I've got to say that I wasn't as scared as I thought I would be walking around there. But at the same time, we've got to make it comfortable for everybody to come in. And so the statistics have to be there, and the feel-good has to be there. So, but we're glad you're here. We're glad that we have the hub, which is going to make a big...
this is my first visit to the hub. I can tell you this, that I've never been shy about wanting to be on television or be interviewed. And I certainly would like to make more of a permanent appointment. I probably talk about... Cool. Now, my wife is going to see this, and she's going to say, you talk too much. You didn't like Craig talking.
No, that's fine. You don't want me to talk here. As long as, we get Bev in to talk, bring her in, and then we can have her talk, too. So we'll have a cooking show with Bev.
Another thing I see, you can't see it on camera here, but there's a lot of Nick Wallenda material around here and everything. Yeah. Nick Wallenda is inextricably tied to the city of Niagara Falls. He will be for the rest of his life. And the tourism industry will be tied to him for the next decade here in the city of Niagara Falls. He's only 33 years old. He's got a long time ahead of him. We have to convince Nick Wallenda. Nick Wallenda has developers that are approaching him to do something in Niagara Falls. Entertainment promoters that are approaching him to do something in Niagara Falls. We have to convince him that the best opportunity for him is Niagara Falls, New York, not Niagara Falls, Ontario.
You want to weigh in on the presidential campaign? You want to tell us what you think there? What do you think,
well, let me say, I'm not objective about it. I'm a Romney delegate to the Republican National Convention, so I can tell you this, it was a great honor for me that Governor Romney appointed me to a national committee for Polish Americans. Maziarz is Polish. I'm Polish, my ethnic origin, and the governor, his senior staff people called me and asked me if I would serve on this national committee. And I thought it was sort of an honorary kind of position, that there'd be maybe a couple hundred state legislators on it of Polish origin, but there's only 11 of us. So, I mean, they really expect us to go out there and do some work. So I look forward to it, though. It's going to be great.
Great. Well, look, I look forward to
Right.
coming back,
Right.
and thanks for
Thank
being
you. Thanks
here.
for this opportunity. It's a great idea.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, Senator.